You've probably heard this one. Withdraw extra from your RRSP before retirement and shift it into your TFSA, tax-free growth for the rest of your life. Sounds smart, and for some people it is. But here's what nobody puts in the thumbnail. This move only works if you actually have unused TFSA contribution room. And for most Canadians close to retirement, that room is nearly gone. I've been there myself. A few years ago, I got excited about this exact strategy until I logged into CRA and checked my account. I had $600 of TFSA room left. Not exactly a game changer. Mark ran into the same wall. He's 57, lives in Ontario, and has $350,000 sitting in his RRSP. His TFSA has been maxed for years. The 2026 annual limit is $7,000, and he'd used every dollar of room going back to 2009. When he heard the RRSP to TFSA trick, he pulled an extra $10,000 out of his RRSP that year. The problem? He had nowhere tax-free to put it. His income that year pushed him from a 29.65% marginal rate into the 33% bracket. Those are the combined federal and provincial rates for Ontario in 2026. That extra $10,000 cost him $3,300 in tax instead of $2,965, and it didn't buy him anything. So if this trick is a dud for most of us, is there a smarter way to keep more money in retirement? That's exactly what we're going to work through today, and it doesn't require a TFSA at all. If you're within 10 years of retirement and you want strategies that actually fit your situation, hit subscribe. We cover this stuff every week. The idea behind this trick is actually sound, in theory. Your RRSP grows tax deferred, but every dollar you eventually pull out gets taxed as income. Your TFSA grows completely tax-free, and withdrawals cost you nothing. So if you can move money from the taxable bucket to the tax-free one, you win, right? That logic works fine if you have two things: unused TFSA room and a low income year. The advice was built for people who retire early with no employment income, no pension, and a gap between stopping work and when CPP and OAS kick in. In that narrow window, their marginal rate can drop to 20% or lower. Withdrawing from the RRSP in that window and filling the TFSA is a genuinely good move. But that's not most people's situation. Statistics Canada's Survey of Financial Security, published in 2025 using 2023 data, found that 62% of Canadian households between ages 55 and 64 already have a TFSA. And among those who have one, the median value is $41,500, which means most of them have been contributing steadily for years. Room is scarce. So the advice that circulates online was designed for a scenario that doesn't match where most of us actually stand. Financial content tends to get built around the clean example, the one where the numbers work neatly. The messier reality, where someone has $600 or $1,500 of TFSA room left, doesn't make for a great headline, and the cost of that mismatch is real. Let's say you withdraw $8,000 from your RRSP in a given year, but your TFSA only has $1,500 of room. That means $6,500 of the withdrawal has nowhere tax-free to go. You park it in a regular non-registered account. Over 10 years at 5% annual growth, that $6,500 becomes $10,585. But in a non-registered account, you pay tax on the growth along the way, dividends, interest, and eventually capital gains. Assume a blended 30% tax drag on the gains. You end up with about $9,410 after tax. If it had been inside a TFSA the whole time, you'd have the full $10,585. That's a gap of $1,175. Just from a single year's misstep. The rule that protects you is simple. Only withdraw from your RRSP to move into a TFSA if you have unused TFSA room that covers the full withdrawal. If you don't, you're paying tax today for a benefit you can't even receive. So if the TFSA route is blocked, What's the real opportunity? That's where we need to talk about your RRIF and a couple of tools that most people overlook completely. I used to recommend the RRSP to TFSA move to almost everyone. I thought it was a no-brainer, but once I started seeing how many people had no room left in their TFSA, I changed my approach. And what I found instead is that two tools, already built into the tax code, do far more heavy lifting for most retirees, and neither one requires TFSA room. The first is the pension income credit. When you convert part of your RRSP into a RRIF at age 65, the income that flows out of that RRIF qualifies for a federal non-refundable tax credit on the first $2,000. That credit alone is worth roughly $300 in federal tax savings every year. Add the provincial credit, and you're often looking at $500 to $600 in combined savings annually, just from making one conversion. The second is pension income splitting. Once you reach 65, you can allocate up to half of your RRIF income to your spouse on your tax return. If one of you is in a higher bracket, this can move thousands of dollars from a 33% rate to a lower one. That's real money, year after year, and it doesn't cost you a thing to do. Here's how Mark used both. At 65, he converted $50,000 of his RRSP into a RRIF. He didn't touch the rest of his RRSP. The minimum withdrawal on a RRIF at age 66 is 4.17%. On $50,000, that's $2,085. He takes just that amount. Of that $2,085, he splits $1,000 with his spouse, who is in a lower tax bracket. That moves $1,000 from his 33% rate to her 20.5% rate. His tax on that portion drops from $330 to about $205, saving $125 just on that split. He also claims the $2,000 pension income credit, which at their combined federal and provincial rates saves roughly $600 more. All in, Mark is saving close to $900 in tax that year from a $50,000 conversion. No TFSA room required, no complicated strategy, just two credits the government already built in. Now, the framework for doing this well isn't complicated. First, figure out your current marginal rate. If you're below 29%, a small RRSP to RRIF conversion at 65 makes sense to capture the pension credit. If you're above that, you need to think carefully because converting at a high marginal rate can work against you. Second, check whether your spouse or partner is in a lower bracket. If yes, income splitting will reduce your combined bill. Third, once the minimum withdrawal is in your hands, look at whether any TFSA room is available. If it is, use it. If not, use the funds to pay down non-deductible debt or redirect them towards something like an RESP for grandchildren. That $900 a year sounds modest, but over 20 years, that's close to $18,000 in tax saved. And those savings compound because you're keeping more money working inside the registered accounts. The question isn't whether this works. It does. The question is when to start. Even with the right conversion strategy in place, there's one more risk that can quietly undermine everything. And it has nothing to do with tax brackets. It has to do with when the market falls. This is called sequence of returns risk. The idea is straightforward. If the market drops in the early years of your RRIF and you're forced to sell units to meet the minimum withdrawal, you're locking in losses. The money you sell at a low price can't recover, and the smaller base that remains has less to compound from. The TSX has gone through 3 major drops in the last 25 years. From 2000 to 2002, it fell roughly 40%. In 2008, it dropped about 33%. In early 2020, it fell around 12% in a matter of weeks. These aren't rare events. They're the normal pattern of markets over long periods. Here's the problem for a new retiree. Let's say Mark's RRIF is worth $300,000 going into a year when the market falls 20%. At his age, the minimum withdrawal factor is 4.17%, which means he needs to pull out $12,510 regardless of what the market is doing. If he sells units to raise that cash while his portfolio is down 20%, he's selling at a discounted price. The units he sells can't participate in the recovery. Over time, that single forced sale can cost him roughly $3,000 in lost future growth, compared to if he'd sold from a position of strength. The solution isn't to avoid the RRIF. The solution is to have a cash buffer outside of it, a non-registered account with 1 or 2 years of minimum withdrawal amounts sitting in something stable. A GIC, or a high-interest savings account, means you never have to sell equity in a down market to fund the minimum. If you go into retirement with your RRIF as the only account and no cash cushion, you're at the mercy of the market's timing. If you have even a modest reserve set aside, you have options. You draw from the buffer in a down year, and you let the RRIF recover. This is the behavioral piece that catches people off guard, and it connects directly to the next trap, the one where knowing the right move isn't enough. I understand the instinct to leave your RRSP alone as long as possible. Every dollar you keep inside is growing tax deferred. The moment you take it out, you owe income tax, so you hold off, and you tell yourself you'll figure it out closer to 71 when you're forced to convert anyway. That instinct isn't wrong. Tax-deferred growth is genuinely valuable. The problem is the assumption that nothing is happening while you wait. Every year you delay past age 65 is a year you don't collect the $2,000 pension income credit. If you're eligible to split income with a spouse, you're giving that up too. Those aren't hypothetical numbers. They're quiet losses that accumulate year by year. Waiting until 71 also means your RRIF balance is larger when you're forced to start withdrawals. A larger balance means higher minimum withdrawals. Higher withdrawals mean higher income in your tax return, which can start pushing into OAS clawback territory if you're not careful. The delay that felt conservative can actually create more tax exposure later, not less. I don't know your exact income level or your retirement plans. Those details matter, and they're going to be different for everyone. But I do know that waiting until 71, because you're afraid to make a change, is the one mistake I see more consistently than any other. It's not greed or carelessness. It's just easier to leave things where they are. The smallest move that breaks the inertia. Convert just $5,000 or $10,000 of your RRSP into a RRIF at age 65. That's enough to unlock the pension credit and test out income splitting. It's small enough that the tax hit is manageable. If you run the numbers and it makes sense to do more, you can. If you decide to hold there, you've still captured real savings. One small step is better than 6 years of standing still. So now you have the framework. Check your TFSA room before any trick. Consider a small RRSP to RRIF conversion at 65 to activate the pension credit and income splitting. Keep a cash buffer to manage sequence of returns risk. The question is, what does this actually look like over time? Let's put the two paths side by side. Let's make this concrete. Two people, same starting point, both are 65 years old with $400,000 in an RRSP. Same income, same province, same situation. The only difference is what they decide to do right now. Person A waits. They leave the full $400,000 in the RRSP until age 71, when conversion to a RRIF becomes mandatory. At 5% average annual growth, that $400,000 grows to roughly $536,000 by age 71. At that point, the minimum RRIF withdrawal factor is 5.28%, which means they must take out about $28,300 in year one alone. That's a significant chunk of taxable income, added on top of whatever CPP and OAS they're receiving. No pension credit during ages 65 to 70, no income splitting, 6 years of savings left on the table. Person B acts early. they convert $50,000 of their RRSP into a RRIF at age 65. The remaining $350,000 stays in the RRSP, still growing tax deferred. At age 66, the minimum withdrawal on the $50,000 RRIF is 4.17%. That's $2,085. They claim the pension income credit on that income, worth roughly $600 in combined federal and provincial tax savings. They also split a portion of the income with their spouse, saving another $300 that year. Total tax saved, close to $900 in year one. Over 6 years, ages 65 to 70, that adds up to roughly $3,600 in cumulative tax savings. And at age 71, their combined RRIF and RRSP balance is still substantial, with a lower forced minimum withdrawal than person A faces because they drew down a portion gradually rather than all at once. They have more flexibility, not less. I think about my dad, who was a retired teacher. He called me when he was 70, genuinely worried about his RRIF conversion. He'd never looked at it. We had about 8 months before the deadline. He didn't realize how much earlier planning could have helped him, not in a dramatic way, but in quiet savings that accumulate over years. That call is why I keep coming back to this topic. Converting early in small amounts almost always gives you more options. The numbers support it, the tax code supports it. And there's one more thing worth knowing about how your province factors in, because the provincial piece changes the math depending on where you live. Here's where we land. Before trying any RRSP to TFSA move, check your available TFSA room. If the room doesn't cover the full withdrawal, the trick doesn't work, and you'll just pay tax for no gain. At age 65, consider converting a small amount of your RRSP, even $5,000 or $10,000, into a RRIF. That unlocks the pension income credit and opens the door to income splitting with your spouse. If your marginal rate is above 29%, go slowly and run the numbers first. You don't need a complicated plan. You just need one decision. Start at 65, not at 71. If this helped you see RRIF planning differently, hit subscribe and share this with someone who turns 65 this year. That one small action could save them thousands.